Hi folks, I'm Brandon from Workbrew. I'm going to talk about something quite a bit different from Swift development with you tonight. So if you want to jump in with questions as we go, that's okay. I'm not going to take up a ton of your time today, but I want to talk to you about something that we've been working on this year around Homebrew. So before we start, show of hands, how many of you have Homebrew on your Mac right now? Yeah. So I got an audience full of people who care about Homebrew and who probably care about continuing to be able to use it at work. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that Homebrew is presenting right now for companies and what we're trying to do to fix that. So first of all, I'm going to introduce you to myself. This is me. I've done a little bit of everything in my career at this point. I was a system administrator for a long time. That is actually me right there, 26 years ago. Standing in front of a Linux Beowulf cluster, if anyone was around in that era. But then since about 2010, I've been a full-time professional software developer. I'm mostly a Rubyist. I have done a little bit of Swift. All of you would be embarrassed to see my Swift code, so I won't show you any today. But right away, from the very beginning of my involvement in software development, I found myself contributing to open source package management. It's just always been like a natural itch for me to scratch. And when I started working at Workbrew, I tried to think about the first time I ever got involved in something like this, and I was able to find, this is the very first commit of mine anywhere in the open source world, and it was to FreeBSD ports, because I was using that as my package manager at the time. So eventually, the Mac dropped, Mac OS 10 at the time. The very, very first version came out. I ran out and bought a G4 PowerBook right away and found that I needed an open source package manager on the Mac. And so Apple had created this thing called Darwin ports 26 years ago when they launched the new Mac OS 10. And immediately, I started contributing to that. It's now known as Mac ports. Very few people, I think, use it these days. Even Apple themselves have moved over and are Homebrew users. But you know, this has sort of been a passion of mine for a while. So it wasn't until 2018 that I became a Homebrew contributor. But since then, I've been heavily involved in the project through my work at Workbrew. That has, taken on a new level, and we're really privileged to have a bunch of the Homebrew maintainers and contributors on our team at Workbrew helping us do this. So, talk very, very briefly about Homebrew. I saw every hand in this room go up, so you already know what it is. It's the #1 app store for developers, right? It has everything under the sun. This slide's actually out of date. It's 16 years old now, which is crazy to think for an open source project. Of course, you get your developer tools with it, you upgrade them. I think that sort of the idea that it's an app store for devs, though, is maybe a little bit out of date, because today, you can do this, right? And this. And this is the kind of thing that scares your corporate security and IT departments, right? So let's talk about sort of what's there, what we're doing about it. So the first thing is that, at present, there's 15,000 packages available. Most of you probably work in environments where IT wants to know what is on your Mac, and they want you to ask permission to put it there. And most of them are scared to death of the idea of you having access to 15,000 things, right? So it is ubiquitous. There are 35 million devices currently checking in with GitHub telling us that they're using Homebrew on a daily basis. That's just the ones that are allowed to communicate that information to us. So there's probably a much bigger footprint out there that we don't know about. And the chief thing about Homebrew, what makes it so valuable to all of us, is just how active it is. So this is just a single month in the middle of the summer when people are on vacation, and you see that there were over 3,000 pull requests merged to Homebrew core just in that month. So this is really why we care about it, why we're so dependent upon it. And really, it's the shining example of a successful open source project. I was actually shocked when I ran the numbers and found that 14,000 unique people have contributed to Homebrew core. That's unheard of in an open source project. You know, you're typically, I'm sure some of you in here maintain open source tooling, and you're probably the only person committing to that project on a regular basis, right? So this is like pretty insane numbers. And what's really cool about it is that it installs the software the same way every single time on every single Mac that you put it on. And so because of that, we're able to build all kinds of automations and things on top of Homebrew that other package managers are not always as consistent about. We also have a tremendous amount of work going on right now in the background around package security. So a lot of this stuff is like not turned on by default, but if you want to go dig around in Homebrew, you'll find that we actually have an entire cryptographic chain of trust built. GitHub themselves are signing Homebrew packages now, which is pretty cool. So there are some problems with Homebrew. The largest problem with Homebrew is that it is a single player experience. It assumes that you own your Mac, you can put whatever software you want on that Mac, and it doesn't provide any way for anyone on the team to know what's on everyone else's Mac. And so a lot of us spend time chasing down bugs, dealing with things that are really just, oh, I have a different version of the database than you do. It's not a bug, right? Corporate security and IT, they're concerned about this lack of guardrails. There's nowhere natively in Homebrew to place any restrictions on what's available. And unfortunately, it is the #1 attack vector for Mac endpoints. If you go out and talk to security professionals, pen testers, people who get hired, they'll say the very first thing they do when they walk into a new engagement is install Homebrew on a Mac, because they're going to use Homebrew to get all of the other things they need to break into the system, right? So that is not great in and of itself. There's also like a game of cat and mouse that's being played with people who are trying to get you to download a malicious installer, get malware onto your Mac. This particular website right here, this is a exact carbon copy of the official Homebrew website with one letter in the domain name different. They bought a Google ad, and there is a rootkit in this installer, right? So not great. Also, right out of the box with Homebrew, you can run the brew tap command and put in any GitHub URL you want and start installing whatever unapproved third-party software you want on your endpoint. This is one that, I'm sorry, I've told a lot of security people about it this year. Security people didn't actually know this was possible. They were already worried about the 15,000 packages that are natively in Homebrew. But the reality is that if you go out there, you will find people trying to attack Homebrew through third-party taps. You will find people trying to poison Stack Overflow results and get you in the mindset of just saying, oh, sure, whatever. I'll just pull in that third-party thing. So at Workbrew, we see all of these problems. And what we also see is that in a lot of industries, Homebrew is actively being taken away from people. And we're on a mission basically to keep that from happening, to make it possible, especially in regulated industries. If you work with folks in the UK, you might know about their Cyber Essentials law there that is requiring them to take sudo access away from people on their endpoints. There's just all kinds of ways in which Homebrew doesn't work in a lot of these regulated enterprises. So we decided we would build enterprise-ready Homebrew. We're going to try to make this a multiplayer experience that is safe to use at work. So it's pretty dead simple, and that's kind of the beauty of it. So it is something that your corporate IT folks deploy through an MDM, whatever they're using to manage the Macs at your company. And then it is a management layer itself on top of open source Homebrew. And that's important. It's not a fork. We didn't fork Homebrew in any way. We built a management layer around it. And so any of your automations or shell scripts or things that you have already built up don't have to change in any way for you to start using Workbrew. So you'll deploy out to devices. You'll get a bunch of inventory information about those devices. You will get a ton of analytics and observability. You'll see that there are things like vulnerabilities being highlighted here. You know, we also, you know, have sort of policies that you can set, and you can show when people are in violation of the policy. We also, this is something that I personally love about our product and care a lot about, is we have automated developer onboarding. So that wiki page that you all have that says like step 1, install Homebrew, like step 2, install these 50 things that you need to work here, that can become configuration as code. It can become what's called a brew file, which is a thing that we've built into open source Homebrew. You can create lots of these brew files. You can see here that you can actually run them on different groups of devices. So every team in your company can have automated developer onboarding for their Mac. And when we get in a moment out of the world of slides, and I actually show you some stuff, I'm going to show you how this can actually be a GitOps workflow as well, which is really cool. So we have all of this information about the inventory of packages out in your fleet, and so we can constantly cross-reference that with the CVE database, so that when things like XZ happen, I think that's in everyone's recent memory, the supply chain attack on the XZ package, we can actually alert IT and security about every single machine that has that package installed and give them a one-click upgrade button to install that patch. So if any of you were around during Heartbleed when OpenSSL like had a similar supply chain attack, for IT departments, that was a nightmare. That was months of writing scripts and trying to figure out where every copy of OpenSSL was out in the fleet. And so what we're trying to do here is convince IT and security that by letting you use Homebrew through Workbrew, it's actually an asset, not a liability to them, because now they have visibility into what those problems are and they can easily fix them. So that's most of what I want to show you is actually the product itself. So this is what it looks like. It's changing a lot every day. You can come in here. You can get a complete list of every Homebrew package installed anywhere in a fleet of Macs. So I know you all are familiar with the XKCD comic where like the whole world is held up by OpenSSL, right, at the bottom. Imagine knowing that about your organization. Like, what is that little open source project at the bottom that everyone at your company depends on? You actually have that information for the first time ever. So you can also, you know, go in on a per device basis. This is actually the Mac that I'm talking to you on right now. You can see every Homebrew formula I have installed, what the status of it is. You know, if there's a newer version of it, you can see, for example, AWS CLI, which upgrades itself like once a week. So there's a new version of that available. We also have this detailed vulnerability reporting. So you can come in here and we'll give you CVSS scores. We'll link you out to the individual CVEs. We'll tell you who's affected. And then remotely, without IT having to come talk to you about it, I can run a brew upgrade command on your device. So we have a super rich policy engine where we can restrict the software that's available to you. One of the coolest, in my view, policies is this allowed taps policy. If I fill this out and create this policy, no one can run brew tap at the command line without coming to talk to me first, which is amazing. Like, that's the biggest side door in Homebrew right now. So yeah, that's what we're up to. I know it's not Swift programming, but hopefully it is something that matters to you. If you are in a company where you are starting to get uncomfortable questions about the fact that you have sudo on your Mac, and you can install 15,000 packages, don't let them take it away from you. Come talk to us. There is a free version of it. It is truly free. There's no device limit. There's no time limit. It's like, we'd rather you use the free version of Workbrew than lose access to Homebrew.